You want to try it one more time?
No.
Just, you want to tell a knock-knock joke?
No.
Do you know any jokes?
No. What's green and sits in the corner?
Frog?
A naughty frog.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Remind episode. So I think we're up to episode 8. Oh my goodness. Wow. Week 8 since we've launched. So that's like what, if I do my maths correctly, that's like 2 months. Damn.
Yeah.
It's been 2 months of spending a lot of time every week talking with you, Ash, and I've been loving every minute of it.
Absolutely love it.
Today's episode, we're going to be diving into being aware. Self-aware.
Self-awareness. This is one of my favorite things of all times because obviously to be self-aware, we need to know who self is. And that takes us right back to where this all started, really,
Like
doesn't
episode
it?
2. Episode 2.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Sense
think
of
we
self.
even spoke about it in our intros, to be honest.
Possibly, yeah.
But self-awareness really is at the basis of everything. It's huge.
All right. So coming off last week, which was about success, and you know, a lot of that stuff that we talked about was what does success actually look like for you? Now we're sort of building upon that to sort of go, well, what are some of the things that we should be aware of while trying to be successful? Or when we're dealing with people, how do we sort of know what's going on in the world where even sometimes I forget the word mystoma, which in itself is quite funny for those who don't know what mystoma means. It's like a blind spot. And I remember trying to figure out what that word was because I'd forgotten the word that meant blind spot. Maybe that's
Let's just call it a blind spot. It's the unknown unknowns. So I love this concept of there are unknown unknowns. There are unknown. Wait.
There are known,
there are unknown unknowns. There are known unknowns, and then there are known knowns.
Yeah. So that
I got there in the end. So the unknown unknowns are the things that really lurk beneath the surface in our unconscious mind. And the definition of unconscious is to not see. How crazy is that? So to not see, it's the unknown unknowns. And it's the unknown unknowns that really mess us up. Like the unconscious patterns of behavior that we engage in, the unconscious ways we seek out drama, or the unconscious ways we set people up around us for failure or success. The unconscious things that lurk beneath the surface about ourselves based upon our values and our belief systems and our morals and all these kinds of things. And so the reason I am such a massive advocate of self-awareness work and that self-development is because if we are not aware of our own internal experiences, of our biases, of our perceptions, of the things that motivate us, how we are impacting others, so how we're perceived by others and received by others, our desires, our goals, we cannot be fulfilled, functioning humans.
Absolutely. And I think when we look at that, and for me, my biggest, I won't say fear, but the biggest thing I focus on is when I perceive something, that perception of whatever that is, whether that's a situation, a person, a behavior, it's through what I have experienced in my life, what my values are, and all of those things. And how close is what am I looking at or perceiving close to what's actually happening? And so when we're sort of looking at that, what if what I'm perceiving, especially with my own actions, I believe I'm doing a really great job and I'm also being very caring and empathetic, but then suddenly in reality, I'm just playing out through a trigger and I could be doing so much more, almost to the point where some people sort of say you're being too reserved in what you're giving and having that really big disconnect. And I believe when we sort of start diving into this self-awareness, it's really about that. Almost a little bit like checks and balances, but not to the point where you could almost gaslight yourself, right? It's sort of
Yeah,
like,
it's not about shaming ourselves
no.
or judging ourselves or anything else. It's just about really having a deep understanding, because the thing is, if there are unknown unknowns, we can't change it. We are powerless. So when it comes to having a victim mentality or a victim mindset around things, what that's really meaning is uncertainty feels very unsafe and dysregulating to our nervous system. So, what does that actually look like? Well, when our nervous system is dysregulated, our impulse control might be terrible. We might make decisions that we consciously know are illogical or irrational or irresponsible, but yet we just make them anyway. It's like there's a drive, self-sabotaging kind of behaviors. It can look like lots of different things. So for me, the necessity to understand this is about not about shaming ourselves or blaming ourselves, but about actually being willing to self-reflect and get an understanding of why do I do that? What drives that behavior? When I look back at my past, all of the relationships that I had, including my current relationship when we first got together, our relationship was really unhealthy when we first got together. And it took for us to really drastically change as human beings. And we have the most beautiful relationship I've ever had now. Two very highly conscious people. But when I look at the pattern of behavior in all of my previous relationships, there were unconscious programs at play. There were unconscious ways that I sabotaged myself, that I set my partners up for failure, that I would, the things that I would say or wouldn't say, so that I could continue to play these unconscious stories and beliefs that I had on repeat. It's crazy.
Oh, it is. And I think what you've touched on is when you're triggered. Like right now, I'm very aware for those watching on YouTube that the sun's dipping in a very certain position where I don't have a curtain and it's irritating my face, right?
Now, if you're not on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any other platform, go to our YouTube channel, click the subscribe button, and you will be rewarded with a big picture of a big bright tip on Dave's nose.
Nose, yeah. So I'm aware of that because it's being pointed out to me. And I guess this is kind of like a segue, right? The people around you, the people that you keep within your circle of friends, your family, whether you like it or not, they're going to be able to show you things that you may not be seeing. They're going to be able to sort of go, David, I think this. Ashley, I think that. And so it's also very important when you think about that, having an understanding of those people, that company that you keep. Why are they there? Because do I have to have them there because I'm afraid of losing them? Well, if that's the case, the standards that you hold or the values that you share together within your group, are they common? Because if you can get to a point where you're surrounded by it doesn't have to be a vast majority of people, but it's the quality and how you share and align values together. They can be your biggest mirror. They can reflect to you in a way which is not going to be pleasant, because no one likes to, always be
See
sort of going,
themselves. No one likes to see those ugly parts of the truth.
that's it, David, you're being arrogant. Oh, it's a great day. Yes. To be able to show that. Because generally when we're triggered, sometimes we might be able to feel it, sometimes we won't. And one thing that I've learnt is, and you mentioned it earlier, and that's why I've sort of got under my name on YouTube, another reason why, as opposed to seeing my pearly white teeth with this light that's irritating me no end, is that you can't be triggered and curious at the same time.
Yep.
Like if you are triggered, you simply cannot sit there and go, why am I, what? When you're fully triggered, you're just acting out that trigger. So being able to stay as much curious as possible when you feel as though, am I acting within the values of what I would like to hold myself to?
Yeah, that's massive. It's almost like one of the things I speak about a lot in my Rise and Thrive program, which is all about self-awareness, right? So everything that I do in my work with clients, whether it's one-on-one, group work, workplace stuff, it's based off 3 pillars. The first one is awareness. Because if we don't have awareness, we don't know how to change. We don't even know who we want to be or how we want to be. Then there's education, and then there's transformation. So transformation is the final step to be able to go, okay, well, let's actually do the processes. Let's actually apply those therapeutic principles to be able to release the blocks and release the stuff that's holding us back from being who we want to be. And so a lot of people can be deeply frustrated by, they know how they want to be as a parent. I don't want to yell at my kids. I don't want to hit my kids. I want to be able to play with them. I want to enjoy snuggling with them. I want to read to them. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel happy. I want to laugh with them. Except some people, like for me, I used to be deeply triggered by the sound of my kids laughing. It used to activate me. The sound of my kids laughing and playing and having fun and being noisy, that used to be a massive activation for my nervous system. That would trigger me. And so my unconscious behaviors would be to shut it down, tell them to be quiet, yell, right? Now, there's a gap there between the mum that I want to be and the mum that I was. So then it was about understanding, well, what's going on here? What is this bringing up for me? I grew up in a home where children should be seen and not heard. It wasn't safe to have fun. It wasn't right. And so actually my children demonstrating joy and laughing and having fun actually activated the wound within me that I wasn't safe. And even though I'm not in that time and space anymore, every cell of your body encodes all the data from your previous experiences. So when things are triggered, actually, we just covered this in Rise and Thrive recently, reframing what a trigger is. And I use the analogy of salt and a wound. So if you have salt and you sprinkle that salt on perfectly healthy skin, doesn't do anything, does it?
No effect. No effect.
No effect whatsoever. But if you take the exact same salt and you sprinkle that salt on a wound, a gaping wound or a graze, what's going to happen? It hurts. It stings. It hurts like heck, right? You're probably going to scream. You're going to have these automatic reactions to that. So in a world where we have been kind of programmed and enabled to make all of our hurts and all of our triggers everyone else's problem, I'm encouraging people to actually go, that really hurt me. What did that bring up for me? Because one option is we can defend and protect our wounding and make it someone else's responsibility to turn that salt into water so it doesn't hurt us. Or we can keep the salt because we can't control our environment outside of us, and we can heal the wound so that there is no wound there to be triggered by the salt in the future. And so I think that for me personally, I'm a really visual person. So that analogy really, really
Mm,
made a huge impact for me. Because if I don't know the wounds that I'm carrying, how could I possibly heal them? And that's the concept of
mm.
the unknown, right?
The unknown, unknown. And just because you consciously say, okay, as of today, I now want to know all my unknowns. It doesn't necessarily happen that way.
No.
So
But a
it's
very
going,
bold prayer is reveal to me.
okay.
Reveal to me the areas that I need to heal. Because then you're going to be triggered. Someone, and I call this your spiritual teachers, right?
Mm,
Someone comes and offends you, they are teaching you, and as you said before, mirroring to you the areas within you that need healing. So if I'm offended
absolutely.
by something, if I'm hurt, my feelings are hurt by something, and we actually
Mm,
put together a list. Here's some of the examples. I'll look at them here. When people, it hurts me when people raise their voice, when people stand me up, when I don't feel heard, when people don't see my
mm,
worth, when people undermine what I'm saying or doing, when people accuse me of lying or don't put in the same effort or use me or let me down or don't want to spend time with me, people are on their phones or people
mm.
send a thumbs up emoji. They're all examples of it hurts me when, right?
I've got to say, some of those still, you read a couple, I'm just like, oh, yep, they still tickle, don't they?
Yes. And so if we are not actively doing the work within ourselves and going,
Mm,
reveal to me, show me what is there. Like just by reading that list, some of you may have had a visceral reaction to some of the things that I said, where you've gone, oh,
mm,
that makes my blood boil, or oh, that really hurts my feelings. And then when you go deeper, like, what is that really bringing up in me? So when someone raises their voice, that might be really bringing up, I'm not safe.
mm.
And so
Well, yeah, it's being overpowered.
being overpowered massively. And so some of the other deeper wounding, because someone raising their voice is not a wound, right? That's the salt. But my visceral reaction to um, someone raising their voice, when I ask the question, what is this really bringing up in me? That exposes the wound. And so
Mm,
maybe it's a feeling of, I'm not important. No one cares about me. Nothing I say is good enough. I'm not enough. What are some other
or
common ones? I
even
don't,
even being dominated, right? Having a trauma of someone bending someone's will by dominating them.
yeah, but what would
Uh,
that say about them?
oh, okay. Well, I'm just sort of saying that loud person, they're being loud to dominate to try and get their way. So the
Yes,
person being yelled at, if we're talking about the trigger within the person, say being yelled at, it's the
yes,
fact that they've been in an unsafe environment and they've had to people please for survival.
yes. And so what it's really bringing up in them is, I'm not safe.
Yes.
Right? Or I don't matter. Other examples are, I'm not good enough. I think I might have said that.
Mm,
But it could be, I'm not good at craft. Like it could be anything, right?
mm,
But the point is, if we don't know what our wounds are, we can't heal them.
mm. Oh, I'm
And
afraid
so,
of losing this,
yeah,
whatever this is. Yeah.
yeah. So it's a
This.
very, very bold prayer or bold ask to say, reveal to me the areas of my heart that need to be
Mm.
healed.
Absolutely, like from a definitely
Very.
from like a if you don't believe in prayers or if you just want to set it from a
It's
spiritual
an
point of view,
intention.
exactly right. You set the intention to show me the things that need healing, and it's
Yeah.
not an instant thing. And when it does come up, it may take a few goes, and then as you start to work through that, and I've especially found with my own journey, is that when you start with one and then it turns into two, as you sort of become aware of it, then you start to see three, four, five, six start to pop up everywhere. They're not as big and not as triggering, but they're still there. Then suddenly
Yes.
you're like, wow, I feel great, because I'm starting to see this. Like I've seen my road rage go from having road rage to no road rage. That's just one sort of example. But then suddenly you hit this plateau, and then out of nowhere, another one comes along. Oh, I thought I dealt with that. Boom, There's
We're
more,
going a whole level deeper. We're
right? And
going deeper.
it's okay. So when you set the intention, that's the first part. Don't expect, and don't sort of feel shame or guilt that you're not sort of plowing through them, tick 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 tick. One a
Yeah.
day or one a week or
Or
whatever
that's
it
dealt
is,
with now and never to be seen again.
because it absolutely will come back. And so it's just being and
I'm,
this is
I'm
where I
gonna
love,
I'm gonna red team that. I'm not gonna
right?
say that it's gonna come back because you can't unheal something. So if you have
Yeah.
healed, if you've healed something and you've actually resolved it at a nervous system level and that data has been released, it can't come back
But it might feel
unless we've
like,
had a new experience. But what we can do is we can go another level deeper because our nervous system will only release what it feels safe to release at that time. And so let's say, I'm going to completely make this up and this is not how it works, but let's say an analogy of we've got a fear of abandonment of 100 and we go, oh, I've had fear of abandonment come up. And then we do some work and we resolve it. And now we're down to 90, right? So we've dealt with some fear of abandonment, but it still goes deeper than that. It's still got 90 levels deep. And so then we're triggered again in some bigger way. And then you go, what is this bringing up for me? Oh, it's fear of abandonment. I thought I dealt with that. No, we're going deeper in the fear of abandonment because our nervous system didn't feel safe to let go of 100 out of 100 straight away. It's going to release it in bits and pieces. But there are some things where once we release it, it's gone.
depending on the severity, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
depending on the trauma.
It's like letting go of. It's not like taking out the trash, right? It's not just you got a bin full of issues that suddenly it's bin collection day and it's all gone. But I guess
Yeah.
what I meant with it's coming back is sort of like it feels like it's coming back, and I 100% agree that with the bigger issues, what used to be an absolute prickly thorn, which is like 100, and we'll say the fear of abandonment, was constantly consuming
Yeah.
to a point where you would do anything you can to stop feeling that, which might mean people pleasing, which might mean just overly,
Abandoning yourself.
yes, for the views of others.
Yeah.
And you bring that, you start to become aware of that, and you bring it down to a 90 through some work. You're never going to go 100 to zero. But then it comes back, but it's not so bad. Now it's sort of like, I really want this to work, but not at any cost, right? You've started to feel a bit more, okay, there's a
Yeah.
bit more you in that. And then it
Yeah.
comes back again, but again, it's not the same as it was at the start. You're not repeating the cycles while you're releasing these traumas, but it feels like it's coming back. But
Yeah.
being that aware that it's okay, otherwise it's sort of like, I thought I'd done this. Well, have I just stuffed it up?
Yeah. And then we
Or
shame ourselves for not healing right. It's amazing. Something that really, really fascinates me and my attitude towards being triggered has drastically changed. So when I used to feel extremely helpless and hopeless, if someone around me wronged me, I would feel really probably angry at them and I would make it all their fault because I would be offended at the salt, right? So I would be not willing to look at my wound that's been activated. I would be putting all the blame on them. And so a funny example comes to mind where my husband and I were playing a game of cards. We were playing Skip-Bo, which is just a card game.
yeah.
And there's a kind of the equivalent of a wild card in the deck called a Skip-Bo, which can be played as any number. Anyway, we had been playing this one night and we thought like we were going to bed. So I went to the toilet and came back out, but he had dealt another hand. And so I sat down. I was excited. I was like, all right, cool. We're going to play again. I started and got a few cards out. And then it was his turn. And he turned over Skip-Bo, Skip-Bo, Skip-Bo. And then he got
Oh,
a 12. And so I'm laughing, I'm giggling, going, oh my gosh, like what a hand. Like you're having the best luck ever. This is amazing. How good's that? But then he got a 12. So then he played, and then I had a really great hand, and I got a whole bunch of cards out, and I was like, beating my chest, going, "Oh, look at me, I'm so good." Because ongoing joke is that I kick his butt all the time. But then he
Not
he
competitive at
goes,
all by sounds of
no,
it.
definitely not. But then it was his turn, and he's turned over Skippo, 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 Skippo.
Mm.
And there was a defining moment where it went from funny to absolutely suffocating hurt and rage, because I realized that it wasn't luck. He had actually cheated and pulled out all the Skipbo cards, put it in his hand, like in his deck, and was doing it to cheat. And so now the thing that you've got to know about my husband, Dave, you know this, is my husband is my favorite thing about him is that he's like a big kid. He's very light-hearted, he's playful, he makes me laugh. Now, I have more of a serious tone, and we balance each other out really well. But I genuinely love that about him. He makes me laugh. And this one time, like, here's him having a joke, thinking he's just so funny. And I was so deeply triggered. And
Wow.
I felt like he had lied to me, he had cheated, and it brought up so much pain and hurt for me. I was like suffocated, and I absolutely cracked it. And he's sitting there like, it was just a joke. Like, I don't know what I did wrong. I was just trying to have a muck around, right? And so after I was able to come out of, because that was a trauma response, a full-blown trauma response, which exposed a wound in me that before that night and that game of cards, I didn't even know was there. So that was the unknown unknown, right? I woke up that day.
What was it?
Well, I don't know where it came from. And this is my perspective of healing, is that we don't need to know where things have come from, why they're there, or anything like that. We just need to know that it's there so that we can resolve it.
But was it like in a sense, like, was it a very heavy feeling of deception or betrayal?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, right.
And it was from previous trauma that I had experienced where I was deceived and betrayed and lied to. And so the thing is, every experience that we have in our life, every hurt, every pain, every fear, every disappointment, it gets encoded as data in our nervous system. And it needs to be encoded because, like, say, for example, if I touch a hot stove, I need to encode the pain data, which stops me from touching the stove again in the future so I don't get hurt. It's self-preservation. It needs to. And so one way that we can protect ourselves is through anger and reactivity, right? Or deep sadness or whatever it might be. But those expressions, the reaction that I had, I can't really remember, but I think I yelled at him. I was so angry. I projected anger. But that was self-preservation because of the sense of deception and hurt and betrayal that had come up in me that my body was remembering from some other time. And so I was so grateful because that morning I didn't know that was in me. And because of that experience, I then knew it was there. And because I knew it was there and it became a known unknown, then I could actually heal it. And so my perspective of triggers and my perspective of people hurting me and my perspective of, being offended over things or being activated by things drastically changed. Not then, it changed many years ago. But I'm so grateful for those people in my life. And my ex-husband has probably hurt me more than almost anyone else. And yet I have so much deep gratitude towards him for the simple fact that the way in which he has hurt me has exposed the pain within me that now I can heal. He was one of my spiritual teachers, like a soulmate in a sense.
You said something earlier that you can use anger as protection. I'm curious to know a little bit more about that because I'm assuming that when people feel angry, it's a reaction to something that has happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just trying to think of myself of when I've ever felt angry without something else. Maybe I just get frustrated with myself because I'm being clumsy, or I really want to fix this thing and it's not working. But again, if I'm trying to fix something and it's not working, it's, there's something else out there. But tell me about when anger actually protects you, because this is fascinating.
Absolutely. Anger is a massive protection because if you think about proximity, right? If there was I don't know, a grizzly bear standing in front of you, if that bear represents a threat, right?
Mm.
So rage and anger can trigger in the other person you need to retreat, or the threat you need to retreat. I'm feeling threatened and you need to retreat. And so in real life examples, anger might come up when there is a deep sense of fear or
Mm-hmm.
sadness. So if I have a fear of rejection, for instance, and someone rejects me, I'm not going to feel the fear. I'm going to feel anger. Maybe I
So
might
it's
be
almost like
angry.
it's a placeholder for the emotion that you should be feeling.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
It's an external shield for the emotion. And so I kind of when I'm working with clients and they're expressing a lot of anger, I explain to them that anger is like the lid on a bottle. And so quite often what happens is one of two things. When people like have a huge release of rage and anger, and I actually do a process that specifically is about releasing rage and anger from the body, one of two things happens. Either they then go into like full blown body shaking because
Mm.
that's the fear. Fear comes out, or they go into a deep, deep, deep bawling their eyes out sadness.
Wow.
So, generally speaking, anger is the shield to protect us from the deep emotion that's within us. Might be fear of
Interesting.
rejection,
Mm.
fear of being abandoned, fear of being let down, fear of being hurt, judged, whatever it might be. So then if someone judges us, instead of feeling sad or hurt about it, we can be angry towards them, which protects us from experiencing those sad emotions or hard emotions.
So is there a time where you can actually experience anger in a healthy way?
Yep.
Or is it, okay, just, this is a bit of my last question, because then we'll move on, because this for me is, I love this topic.
Maybe we need a whole session on this.
Maybe,
Um,
maybe.
yeah, so anger can definitely be expressed in a healthy way. Generally speaking, anger will always be some kind of shield, but the
Mm-hmm.
expression of anger can be functional or dysfunctional. So, for example, raging and screaming and yelling in anger would be dysfunctional anger that still serves as a shield. It serves a purpose, it protects
Mm-hmm.
us. But so too can healthy anger, where healthy anger might look like setting a boundary, or we might feel that anger in our body. But the interesting thing is, emotion at a biological level lasts for 90 seconds. And
Mm.
anything beyond that is old stored data.
That gets allowed to keep on replaying. Or okay,
Yeah, it just perpetuates the cycle in our body. So it's really interesting. And we can definitely explore this in another
in
episode.
further, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because we could take that so
So,
deep.
so, because I'm just trying to think of ways in which, when people start to become, or they set the intention, I want to be self-aware, but
Mm,
I'm not entirely sure what to look for.
yep.
But I have people telling me I'm too either aggressive, or I have people telling me I'm too sensitive, or I
Hmm.
have people telling me I'm narcissistic, right? Now, it doesn't mean you go out and believe everything that everyone's saying, but you kind of
Yep.
follow some common threads. Okay,
Yep.
you're getting too aggressive when it comes to these type of things, or you're getting too
Yeah.
sensitive when it comes to those type of things. Okay, so maybe I might look at it. Well, I mean, as a broad stroke, people are going to feel sad or angry, right? And so when you start talking about anger, I'm like, oh, okay. If that's one of the emotions that you're going to be really starting to feel, right, okay, chances are, if you're going to be feeling anger, in some instances, you're going to be feeling as though it's actually a placeholder for an emotion you should be feeling. Shame, rejection, abandonment,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
But
it's not
maybe it
enough.
wasn't safe. Like if we've grown up in an environment where our emotions were not met with
Mm,
nurturing and compassion and being able to be received in a loving way, um, but this is particularly true for males because society says men shouldn't express emotions and that's weak and all that sort of stuff, which is ridiculous.
mm,
Not so much in our current generation, which is beautiful to see, but definitely previous generations.
mm,
Um, that can be a really, really big thing. So if it wasn't acceptable for, say, a little boy to cry, they'll
mm.
replace the sadness with anger because it's acceptable for a child to be angry or to express anger. It's
Or
acceptable for a man to express anger, but not
don't
turn in, go to a ball and cry.
don't show
Right.
weakness, show
Yeah.
power, right?
Yeah. And often women will demonstrate it as frustration, not anger. I didn't relate to
Frust-
anger
okay,
at
because
all.
I can relate to anger because me, man.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So just to kind of come back and finish our conversation on
Mm,
self-awareness, I think the greatest thing, and I love that you made the point of if someone gives us that direct feedback and tells us, oh, you're too sensitive, you're blah, 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 it's really important not to take that on, but to be curious about it and at
mm,
least question it. Is it true? What's the evidence that I
mm,
am or am not blah blah blah? Because that can be gaslighting, like they could be gaslighting us. But
100%.
I had this really interesting situation where someone from my past who I grew up with had reached out to me and contacted me and said, you know, in all my relationships, I used to experience blah, 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 blah. And it's only just occurred to me that I'm the common denominator. And
You
so
generally are.
their partner, all of their previous partners had given them the same feedback and had the same complaints and struggled with the same things about them. But they blamed the partner. And it wasn't until they had that moment of self realization where they've gone,
Mm,
ah, I am the common denominator. Maybe there is something that I could look at here. And it's never the person's fault. It is not my fault that I have the trauma responses that I have. It is not my fault that I behave in the way that I do because of my past experiences. It is not my fault. And it's not my parents' fault. I'm not
mm,
blaming my parents for the trauma that I received in my childhood because they were only behaving in the way that they behaved because of the trauma that they had, right?
mm,
And so for me, it's not about blame and it's not about shame, but it's about having a cold, hard look through an honest lens and being courageous enough to see what's really there. Because there are lies and there are deceptions that we will continue to believe throughout our lives that, in any given second, there are hundreds of bits of information available to us. And so if I held up a sentence and asked you just to look at the A's and say, how many A's are there in this sentence? You could count the A's. But if I then said, now, how many T's were there? You'd have no idea. You'd have
mm,
to go back and count the T's.
mm,
And the reason is because our attentional focus can only look at one thing at a time, like what the instruction tells us to look at. So the reason that self-awareness is so important is because we're trying to get an understanding of what are the instructions that we are being driven by. Because if I always see no one ever listens to me,
that's
for
what you're going to
instance,
find.
that you will find evidence of it everywhere.
Mm,
Because out of the
yeah.
hundreds of millions of bits of information, your instruction is to seek out all the evidence where people don't listen to me. But actually, for every one piece of evidence where people don't listen to you, there's probably 100 where they have. We just haven't seen it because that's our blind spot. So self-awareness
Also
is
known
really
as a mistoma. It's my new favorite word.
that's our blind spot. So I think that when you apply this then to relationships, when you apply this to communication skills, when you apply this to making decisions, when we can know ourselves really well and we can know why we are the way that we are, where those beliefs have come from, why we value certain things over others, then we can actually make conscious choices in our lives. We can say, who is it that I want to be? How do I want to treat people? How would I want to respond in this situation? What is the barrier to me responding in the way that I want to? So what's the difference between the desired versus the actual? And then how do I achieve it? And the how do I achieve it? That's where you need the trauma work. That's where you need the somatic work. That's where you need all of that, even to an extent, spiritual work, because some of these things can be spiritual deceptions. Phenomenal.
It absolutely is. And just to sort of add to that as well, when you are receiving feedback from people around you, ask yourself the question, am I in an environment and am I around people that share the same values?
Yeah. Or my
That's
aspirational values, because that's a huge one. I remember before I went on my healing journey, my best friends were the people who, when I was going through a hard time, would rock up on my doorstep with a bottle of wine ready to whinge and bitch for hours at a time. And we'd talk about how crap our lives were and how awful our husbands were and, whose kids were more annoying and who was getting less sleep and all. It was almost like a competition as to whose lives were crap, like the most crap even, but misery loves company. So we were connecting through our toxic values.
yeah.
And so as I grew and as I went on my own personal development journey and spiritual journey, the people around me had to change. Like those people fell away. And now people who do have those aligned values and do represent the self that aligns with who I want to be and where I want to go, that is so important.
And it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, right? But I guess when you set the intention, this is the path I want to go down. As you said before, it's simple, but it's not easy, because you set the intention, I want to be aware of this, and then, as you sort of said, then you start to align your values, either some that are existing that still are compatible, or you take the new ones as you sort of step forward, trust within yourself and listen to yourself. If something doesn't feel right, be curious.
Yeah.
And sort of keep on going. But Ash, this has been a fairly intense subject. And for everyone listening at home, watching us on YouTube, if there's something that you'd like us to talk about more around,
Or unpack.
Being self-aware, let us know, and we'll keep on going with another episode in future weeks coming, because I do feel that of everything we wanted to touch on, some things we did, but this is such a big one where it sort of draws in so many different others.
100%. And this is why awareness is the first pillar in everything that I do, because in every episode that we record, there is an undertone of self-awareness. There is an undertone of people learning more about themselves and questioning more about themselves and having some confronting truths that they have to face. And if you really want a better life, you need to be willing to actually have drastic self-accountability and self-responsibility and look at the areas within us that needs to improve and grow. But if we're not willing to see that, if we're not willing to see the uncomfortable truths, then we can never actually grow as people. So I would encourage you that if you are challenged, receive the challenge with love, with our intention of love and support, And yeah,
And
reach
discomfort
out.
is okay. Discomfort is
Yeah,
growth.
you are safe.
All right. Amazing episode. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next week. Bye
Can't
bye.
wait. Bye bye.